So what are dead moves in Fire Emblem? Dead moves are generally moves that do not do anything, or they are suboptimal moves. They could be being passive, not using items, not using your staves correctly, not using abilities when the situation calls for it, or just generally not being aggressive or tactical when the situation allows for it. In some cases, people unknowingly make dead moves. So in this video, I'm going to break down the types of dead moves that I commonly see, as well as certain types of dead moves that I've made in the past. So let's dive in. All right. The first example of dead moves would be waiting with units when you could be doing something. And this includes like repositioning. So like, let's say I'm playing like really passive and just like moving my team around towards like the objective, which in this case is stopping this dude. I could do this and it could be fine, but this isn't really accomplishing anything. This is also like playing it too safe. Like in Fire Emblem, you do have to move your pieces around and take risks. But here's an example of like doing almost nothing, where I'm basically just like slowly advancing my units, barely really putting in work, if anything. Maybe I like set up an enemy phase and I'm like reluctant to like progress, which is usually a mistake, if not always. So like my only actual productive move of all of my moves so far was setting up an enemy phase that may convert into 2 kills. But aside from that, I've essentially done nothing. So if we actually go back in time and try to be more aggressive, what we could do is we could have Ivy engage and like do some attack. Maybe she like attacks from here, like snap freezes, ideally hitting, and she did. You always gotta throw some shade at Ivy. Now we froze these 2 dangerous sword masters, and then Alir can actually like hop in and just like pop, funnily enough, pop Parthia and just like shoot for some chip. We can start getting in damage and getting some kills. And Alchris can pop, go for a longbow kill maybe if he procs. He does, and it kills, look at that. So now these units actually were able to kill a threat and do something useful, which is important. And then we can go for like Astra if we really wanted to. Get some chip damage on this. Not that that really matters, but this is significantly more proactive. And then we could go for the enemy phase up here still. I could even go here, probably tank it. Pop engage, sit on Fencelar, wait. And if we wanted to, Hort could warp rag this for some chip damage, almost killing it. Now I probably could have set that up a little more optimally to kill this first and then kill the closer one, because the closer one's easier to hit. But you can see the difference between making active moves versus just kind of like repositioning. And sometimes, oh yeah, actually we can get this kill. We can send in Slaylee. Slaylee to get the kill. So she'll get the last hit here. Look at that. Ignis proc as well. So sometimes this can happen. Like, this is really obvious that these were dead moves because it's like the opening turn, and most people like to have a kind of like blowout on their opening turn. But this can happen when like even like psychologically you feel like you're not making enough progress, or you're not being aggressive enough, or even just like you don't think you can attack because you haven't checked or you haven't calculated it, or you're just like overly concerned with like units dying, which isn't like a justifiable concern in maddening mode. But knowing like when you can be aggressive and how you can be aggressive will prevent you from having dead turns, like the turn I had earlier where I'm just kind of like slowly repositioning. So like making use of your engage abilities, actually attacking the enemy position and breaking it down. So we have like 2 instances of like, we have an enemy phase set up, and then we have a more active side where we killed those sword masters, which are usually a problem because sword masters are hard to kill. And then we can like move Diamonds towards the dude we have to kill. Another way you can have dead moves is if you start playing passively, or you just decide to not make unit moves. So for example, I froze this group, and instead of attacking them, if I decide to just like end turn, this is like a dumb example because like obviously you would attack this group and do something, but sometimes people will leave like staff bots, chain guards, heals, repositioning on the table. So for example, if it wasn't obvious what to do, I can always reposition and use items, heal up, remove debuffs, and so on. So you almost never want to just like end turn when you have unit moves available, unless you have a really good reason for doing so. Another example of a dead move or bad moves would be just overly relying on enemy phasing to deal all your damage. Now this is something that I'm forced to do in a lot of the challenge runs that I do, and it's something that I try to optimize for so that I can take advantage of enemy phase while I'm attacking. So for example, Tamara could attack this, probably proc a crit or a sandstorm and kill one. But if I was being overly defensive, something I might do is like drop a chain guard, drop Tamara back, drop all my other units back, maybe do like a dragon instruct or something like that, just to get her stats up. And she's actually on the wrong weapon too, which is funny. But this would be an example of like being passive when I could attack and I have like Goddess Dance available. So I could probably kill like these and kill these and do all these sorts of things. And then also another example of being passive would be like running away from this group after freezing when I have an obvious move of killing this guy here with Saline plus Alchrist because we froze the group to the north. So you don't want to be overly reliant on enemy phasing when you don't have to enemy phase, but you do want to make use of enemy phasing when it makes sense to. Another common mistake is if you are going to be enemy phasing or tanking, not using items when you easily could be. In the previous example, when I moved Tamara to the chain guard, I actually didn't use an item or switch weapons when I could. And both of those things matter, especially if you're enemy phasing. So I could have switched her to Binding Blade and then also used a Vuln to heal her to full because she might as well if she's going to be waiting. So I put her on an optimal weapon and I also had her self-heal. Another example of dead moves would be not advancing, rotating, or retreating when needed. If you don't retreat when you need to, your units will probably literally die, so your dead moves will turn into dead units, so you don't want that. And if you don't advance when you should, the enemies could get away, you could miss out on items, maybe an objective escapes you. There can be actual consequences to playing too slow. So an example of kind of not really advancing would be if I just like create a bondage shield here, just like stick Diamant with Ike here with Ragnell, and then also just kind of like move my dudes up a little bit, but not really that much because I'm being like passive and I don't really want to be aggressive. I'm being passive aggressive. So this is like an example of being like too slow. Like I'm like barely making any progress. So even though I'm still making moves that could lead to like some productive result, I'm kind of ignoring the objective or maybe like a side objective, maybe like a village will get destroyed, maybe an item gets away. And these things do matter, like getting like speed wings and damage boosters and all these things do make you more optimal, and you generally should play to get them if you can. If you're a newer player, take your time, but like it's good to know like what you can aim at. So here's an example, perfect example of not advancing when I should. And I won't go over like the rotation and the retreating, but essentially retreating is the opposite of advancing, and rotation is when you circle your move or circle your units around obstacles and like reconnect and break them off and so on. So like rotation is like circular motions typically. The final example for this video of dead moves would be not using staves when you could. Now this includes healing, which is usually a little bit more obvious. If you have a damaged unit and you have a staff bot that can heal them and you don't have them heal them and the staff bot just waits, or you end turn and don't take action with the staff bot aside from moving or just sitting still or whatever, like holding position, you could be healing, but you also could be using utility staves. So for example, I could obstruct an enemy that is trying to retreat, which allows me to catch up to him sooner. I could warp an ally, I could rescue an ally. Obviously warp and rescue uses usually pretty deliberate, so you don't want to just kind of randomly use them. But you could also do things like freeze. So if I want to go for like a staff freeze, I could do that as well. So let's say Ivy has nothing better to do but to freeze this guy. That is it for this one. I do have a part 2 in mind for dead moves. If you have any examples of dead moves that were not covered in this list, definitely drop them in the comments below. And make sure to like and subscribe for more Mix.